To understand us Chicanos in the present, it helps to first know something about our past. Much of our culture originated in central and southern Mexico. There, highly evolved Indian civilizations existed for many centuries apart from the rest of the world. These people were gifted artists, builders, and astronomers. This sculpture is both a work of art and a very useful astronomical device. Based in large, clean cities containing palaces, marketplaces, and private homes, an elite of warrior priests ruled over a merchant class and millions of farmers. The agricultural genius of these civilizations was the basis of their wealth and power. In the 16th century, Spanish explorers conquered these people. The conquistadores eliminated the Indian ruling groups and put themselves in their places. These men were tough, resourceful soldiers in search of gold treasure. Their culture was dominated by militarism and religion. Catholic priests accompanied the explorers on their most arduous and daring voyages. These bearers of Latin culture converted the Indians to Christianity and taught them the Spanish language. The church was an important source of learning, moral authority, and social control. Many Indians were enslaved to build a copy of European civilization, since the Spanish were true colonialists. Their colonies were run strictly for the benefit of the mother country and the small European elite that administered them. The government was autocratic, with few of the restraints on power that existed in Europe. For example, important public officials always came from Spain, so that the crown could maintain close control. The wealthy Spanish were city dwellers who lived like nobility, spending their time on hunts, parties, and church affairs. Small bands of soldiers, priests, and servants were sent by the vice-regal government to colonize what is now the American Southwest. The Spanish and their Indian and mestizo workers established forts and missions in Texas, New Mexico, and California. Aristocrats from Spain and the descendants of the conquistadores received extensive land grants from the crown. Ranching became the main economic activity, with many of the hides being shipped to Spain. Indian and mestizo serfs developed the vaquero lifestyle, inventing most of the techniques and even the vocabulary of the later American cowboy. Gradually, a new culture came into being that was neither Indian nor Spanish, but a combination of the two. This culture is called mestizo, which means mixed. The name comes from the people of mixed parentage, the mestizos, produced by centuries of proximity of Spaniard and Indian. Chicano is another name used in the Southwest for this way of life. This was a pre-industrial feudal world that had its problems, but which also possessed its own distinctive tempo, charm, and dignity. Then, in the 19th century, an English-speaking people from a new nation, the United States of America, moved into the region. They displaced the Spanish through political deceit, outright purchase, and war. The vast haciendas were taken over, often through illegal means, by powerful American individuals and corporations. These lands were fenced, and the ranching industry organized to serve markets on the eastern seaboard. Despite the imposition of a different culture, many Chicanos continued their traditions and lifestyle. Railroads opened up the area to a great deal of new business activity. Chicanos helped build these railroads and then worked in the mines and factories that followed. This dynamic modern society was created in part through our labor, but despite our efforts, we were often paid less than Anglos for the same work and discriminated against in many other ways. In Mexico, at the beginning of the 20th century, there were many injustices and cruelties committed by the upper classes against the peasants. This state of affairs led Francisco Madero, an idealistic liberal, and the peasant guerrilla generals Francisco Villa and Emiliano Zapata to start a revolution. The farmers who had been robbed of their lands by a small elite arose by the millions to fight any way they could with anything that came to hand. This social upheaval resulted in many important reforms. Although necessary and long overdue, the revolution made life difficult in Mexico, and millions of us migrated to the United States during the teens and 20s. The adjustment to a new country was never easy, but as well as contributing our skills to many other areas of society, we harvested food in both the Southwest and Middle West for America's tables. Farm labor was hard work that kept us constantly on the move, following the harvest seasons of different crops. Company housing and general facilities were minimal, especially by today's standards. But we acquired things like automobiles, which were luxuries in Mexico. Business was booming, and our labor was needed. But in the 30s, an enormous economic decline hit the country, and us in particular. Tens of millions of Americans lost their jobs, and the authorities began to deport Chicanos to Mexico, even though many of us were citizens. These were very difficult years, but we came together to combat the deportations and the unlivably low wages. Through this struggle, we protected ourselves while gaining a sense of our rights within American society. Then the Second World War broke out. Chicanos served honorably in the armed forces on all fronts in this global conflict. The war changed the economic picture, and many of us helped the war effort by working in essential industries. During this period, many Chicanos took advantage of the new work and educational opportunities to advance themselves in American life. At the same time, others of us dealt with social change and an alienating urban environment by inventing our own styles and rhythms. This sometimes resulted in conflicts, as in the famous Zoot Suit riots in Los Angeles during the 1940s. This outbreak of violence was officially condemned by the authorities as racist and totally absolved Chicanos of any responsibility for its occurrence. During the 50s, prosperity returned to the American economy, but there was continued controversy regarding farm labor. Deportations and wages that were low compared to other American workers finally culminated in a movement to unionize farm workers. The 60s were a time of protest and change, and Chicanos played a major role in this democratization of society. Cesar Chavez led the fight of the farm workers to establish their own union with personal fasts, strikes, and national boycotts of agricultural products. Many Americans supported the rights of the farm workers to unionize and bargain collectively. It was a long, hard fight against powerful elements in the society. But it was ultimately successful. The men and women who helped feed America finally had their own union, the United Farm Workers. Cesar Chavez's achievement was great, but there were other important leaders and struggles during this time also. Reyes Tijerina led a land rights movement in New Mexico based on the legality of the original Spanish grants for haciendas. And there was a protracted, bitter strike against a large clothing corporation. In the late 60s and early 70s, young Chicanos, many of them students, became an important factor in social change. In addition to general social issues, they were concerned about being drafted into the Vietnam War, where Chicanos and blacks were fighting and dying in higher percentages than the general population. This demonstration held in Los Angeles was organized by a broad spectrum of groups within the Chicano community and represented our legitimate right and need to be heard during a time of national crisis and reassessment.
Where did this group just come from?
Long Beach.
You guys marched all the way in from Long Beach?
From Long Beach.
Yeah. How was the reception by the communities as you passed through?
It was just beautiful.
Was it?
We encountered so many people on the way from Hawaiian Gardens, then on to Norwalk, then on to Santa Fe Springs, then on to Whittier.
What is you think of the moratorium today, Father?
Well, so far it's very fine. It's very orderly. I think we need something like this, you know, that a community can voice their opinion. Unfortunately, you know, so far we haven't had an effective voice.
This peaceful demonstration followed a long American tradition of constitutionally sanctioned dissent. But afterwards, in a volatile political climate, tense policemen prematurely reacted, and a riot developed. Eventually, the police opened fire. Any civilized community should seriously question the use of modern weaponry on citizens. Such a review will come too late for this man and 2 others who died that day.
Shot in the chest and glad they took the time. Shot in the groin. There's a man wounded here.
To avoid scenes such as this, many Chicano students began to concentrate on the underlying problems that cause unrest and conflict. They organized statewide conferences and politically oriented meetings to unify and direct their community and its aspirations. New, constructive approaches such as bilingual education were advanced and championed.
So bilingual education and bicultural materials would be one of the ways that we would continue to reinforce culture to our people.
Ideas thrashed out in committees were presented to the conferences at large.
3, the ability to criticize oneself and accept the criticism from others and to criticize others. 4, the ability to be serious and disciplined about self-education and work in the community so as not to present to the community or to give the impression that our political involvement is casual or aloof.
Proper conduct of those interested in changing society was discussed and defined.
Added to that were 13 disciplines that should be encouraged among the Mecha membership. The most important is discipline number 5, and I'll go over it. No member shall be in the company of a person or persons who are either under the influence or in the possession of narcotics, unless in the process of giving aid. C, no member shall use narcotics under any circumstances. Narcotics represent one of the most corrupting influences on character and behavior, and in essence leads its users into a dependent state of weakness and confusion. Another important article was that members must respect and have courtesy with each other, and that we must combat male chauvinism and other chauvinisms that we may suffer from.
Collective action is always important in a democracy. But individual initiative and enterprise have also played a major role in American life. In combination, these approaches will forge a new consciousness and destiny for the Chicano people. Throughout society, in education, industry, the arts, and all other professions, Chicanos are fulfilling their own ambitions and destinies while helping the society as a whole to function. The great amount that we have accomplished is a good guide to how much we can achieve. Viva la raza!